And we are back. I've just watched episode 4 of season 2 of Rings of Power. The pacing is still better than season 1, but there are definitely some problems. It starts with Galadriel and Elrond having little spat about how Galadriel got demoted, basically, last time we saw her. Within the context of this show, like, it flows with how Gil-galad and Galadriel's relationship has been going. I'm not convinced Gil-galad in actual canon would dare or even have the power to demote her in anything. But within the context of this show, whatever, I still do not understand why Gil-galad is giving this job to either of them. Both of them have done nothing but talk back to him and literally commit soft treason. Both of them. Is there no other elf to send on this mission? I know they're like the last of this family, but could we hire a member of a different family? Good lord. Oh my god. I think it would have helped if the show made it more obvious that, Gil-galad and Galadriel and Elrond were all, related and that they're basically family. I think this would feel smoother if you're like, yeah, when your cousin kind of committed soft treason to you, maybe you'll overlook it a little bit. Do that, right? When it's your great aunt committing soft treason, it would make more sense that you forgive her, but they don't make that clear, what the relationship between the three of them are. Anyway, Galadriel is being snippy with Elrond, and Elrond is being snippy back. It's hysterical and ridiculous. It's great, whatever. Then we have this map transition. I wish they did more of that. I know I can't shut up about the freaking transitions. These map transitions, I think, are actually, I don't know, maybe they heard that their transitions for the last season and a half have been pretty bad, and they're like, oh, we should put a map so that we can have like a transition between these things. I think that's a good call, just because it gives the audience just a moment to kind of readjust on where we are in the story. This one was pretty cool because it led into they show the bridge and then it transitions into the bridge. I like that. I think that they should be doing more of that. And then we get to like their first. Elrond makes his first leadership decision on this trip. Also, there's like these bunch of extra elves that we didn't even introduce. It's kind of funny how irrelevant they are to the narrative. They just are like, oh, these people that are going on our quest, and then we have no kind of establishing shot of them before we go on our walk. It's kind of funny. I know they're not important, but they could have made it a little less obvious that they're just here to kind of die. He gets a message from the ring that they shouldn't go that direction. Elrond is like, we shouldn't trust the ring. We're going to go in that direction because Elrond, their friction basically this whole time boils into a very one-dimensional. I don't trust the ring, so I don't trust you. You should trust the ring, and I trust the ring, and that's all their conversations this episode. It's very shallow, and then we get introduced to Tom Bombadil. Oh, wow. Okay. It's hard to really process how I feel about this. I'm trying to think through their thought process of why this was a good idea, because it's clearly not. It's not a good idea. Tom Bombadil is very difficult to adapt to screen, and everyone knows that. And I don't know, it made me think of why are people so over the top angry at this adaptation? There's plenty of people who put forward the question of why are people so forgiving of Peter Jackson films and their breaks from lore when this, and then are so harsh on this show. I've seen that question put forward several times, and I think this moment, it just really crystallized, I think, tonally why. There is a undertone of arrogance to this show that I think puts a lot of people off, because to think, oh, I can totally adapt Tom Bombadil just casually, just it feels pretty arrogant. And I won't speak for The Hobbit, but in the Peter Jackson films, don't feel like Peter Jackson's films have issues, and especially issues when it comes to lore. But you don't get this feeling of, oh, we can do this better than Tolkien. You don't get that tone. Whereas you do get that tone with this show in a lot of different points. But when I saw Tom Bombadil, I don't know, it became ever more clear. So they lifted direct quotes from Tom Bombadil's chapter in The Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, the hobbits get kind of sucked into a living tree, and Tom Bombadil shows up and saves them. And instead of the hobbits doing this is now who I hope is the Blue Wizard, but is probably Gandalf, gets sucked up into the tree, right? It is smart, like on the surface, to be like, oh, if I'm going to adapt Tom Bombadil, I might just lift up the dialogue from it because can these people write dialogue for Tom Bombadil? The answer is no, definitely not. But we'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about this transition. You know how much I love talking about transitions. So the stranger gets sucked up into this tree, and then we cut to Nori, just kind of, abruptly, right? I think they could have made this transition a little smoother because he's shouting in the tree as he's getting sucked up. It would have been more meaningful and a better transition if he cries out to Nori as he's getting absorbed by the tree, and then you cut to Nori. That would flow so much better, right? It's a very small thing. It's a very natural small dialogue choice that I think would have helped the flow of this. And the fact that they didn't do that, even though like there's plenty of space for it, makes me think that the script of these different stories may not be woven together at first, and they later decide where these things transition. That would explain a lot about some of the cuts and abrupt changes in scenes that have been happening this last season and a half. So I don't know. Maybe they make the decision later on where to cut these stories. I don't know. It seems like a simple fix. Anyway, next we go to Nori. And what are the chances of Poppy and Nori being blown in a tornado and landing in the same spot? Oh my gosh. I thought this was going to be used as an excuse to separate them, but I guess not. They're here, and then, again, what are the chances of just meeting another Harfoot, basically? So we find this new Harfoot culture that's in holes, like hobbits. And they go to it. It's whatever. I'm starting to see what might be the plot for Nori, because you're like, okay, what is Nori here to do? It's possible Nori is going to start a migration with these people and take them back to the Shire, so to speak. That's a possible plot. It's crazy to introduce a whole other society when we're already have so many things going on. But I guess the reason for this is you need like a society that, at least what they're going for, I think, is a society to root for. We need stakes for this like desert warfare with the Dark Wizard, and now that we have a society that is helpless, that will generate sympathy. At least that's their hope. I guess that's what they're going for. Well, when Nori admits that she is friends with a wizard, they assume she means the Dark Wizard. That's kind of looks like Saruman, but hopefully is a blue wizard. And then we cut to him, and we have kind of a nothing scene where the wizard says that he's going to deal with the stranger, and that they get the Harfoots, and they're scouring the place for the Harfoots. And they're all, I should point out, they're now calling them halflings. Like, when did that happen? They started calling them halflings last episode, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. But now we're using that vernacular, I guess. So this scene happens, and then Tom Bombadil saves the stranger from the tree. They lift dialogue straight from the Lord of the Rings chapter, where the hobbits are stuck in a tree and Tom Bombadil saves them. But now it's the stranger, and we have this scene with Tom Bombadil, and we hear like the disembodied voice of Goldberry, who is Tom Bombadil's wife in Lord of the Rings, but we never see her. I guess this is done in this way so we don't have to show Goldberry. I'm not sure I'm not sure why they went that route, but okay. They made a lot of choices with Tom Bombadil's origins. Now, Tom Bombadil's origin is extremely unclear in all of Tolkien's work. He's kind of a big question mark. We're not sure who he is. There's a lot of different theories about that, but they say he's the oldest, which might imply that he's Iluvatar, which is a common theory. It's ballsy to make any sort of certain statement about Tom Bombadil because he's such a wild character. I'm trying to understand what their thought process was for choosing to include him. Because in their head, clearly they're like, we need someone who has more knowledge than this Gandalf figure and can be like a mentor to him. I think that's what they're like. Okay, and then, Tom Bombadil is like some old, mystical, powerful entity. But Tom Bombadil doesn't really fit the mold of what they want. He's a whimsical entity that doesn't really care. He's kind of separate from everything, and that whimsy they do not capture in this performance at all. He's much too serious and much too grounded, and a lot of what he says makes way too much sense. He's too clear in the way he's speaking to feel like Tom Bombadil. Like he asks him, "What am I here for?" And he actually answers. I'm like, "This is Tom Bombadil. This is not a character that should have the solutions." It feels like a very odd choice to make him that figure. But I understand that they wanted a mentor figure for this probably Gandalf guy. But so what character does fill that role? Well, I'll tell you what character fills that role. Saruman. Saruman's the head of that very order that Gandalf's a part of. He was their leader. This is before he goes evil, allegedly, if the Dark Wizard isn't him. Right? Like it would make so much more sense if he finds Saruman and Saruman and him, like Saruman teaches him stuff and they get together and there's a nice balance of character because Saruman is more focused on the goal and is more whatever it takes, and this stranger guy cares more about the people. You could have a play with that, but seeing a noble version of Saruman, like in the early days when he's helping him, would make his fall all the more sad, and it would make sense. Especially in the way they're doing this story. Saruman's the obvious person to fill this role, not Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil should not be a mentor figure. I am fine with him giving like some wacky advice that ends up resonating, but to be like the full-on mentor figure, I'm not sure that works. It's a very odd character to try to kind of square hole into this role. I'm not crazy about that decision. It's not a great interpretation of that character. I think that from an adaptation standpoint, I would say it's a big miss. From a story perspective, the problem is Tom Bombadil, like, if you don't know who Tom Bombadil is, I'm not sure this scene works. Like, I don't know. People who haven't read Tom Bombadil, in the comments, you could tell me if this scene worked on its own, but it feels like you need context. Like, he just kind of is like this random hermit in the woods that is the oldest being, maybe, and he's just kind of there. It's very out of left field unless you know who he is. But if you know who he is, you're not going to be happy with his adaptation, right? Also, him talking about how he's the eldest and he gives this list of things that he's seen.
Tom was there before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless.
This is an odd choice of choosing to display how old he is, because I'm pretty sure all of the things listed are things that this Gandalf probably, but any Istari that he is, also is old enough. But also, any audience member who doesn't know the lore about Gandalf, or a blue wizard, or any of the wizards, does not understand the scope. Like, to be older than the wizards and to be calling the wizards young is a big deal and says a lot about Tom Bombadil. But what that says is lost on anyone who doesn't know the lore. They kind of give this explanation too early. Like, if they had done this after this wizard character discovers who he is and that he was there at the beginning of the world, then being called young by this guy would have an impact to the audience. Like, holy crap, how old are you? That would mean something. But it doesn't mean something to someone who doesn't know that, right? And also, the things he listed are not things that this Gandalf figure, also was there for. He doesn't remember it because he has amnesia or whatever, but Tom Bombadil knows that. So this list is not actually indicative of him being older than him, right? If he had said that I was already old when you sang the song into existence, that would mean something. But the first acorn, this guy was there at the first acorn. And Tom Bombadil, at least in this version, knows that because he clearly knows who the stranger is. So a weird list to explain how old he is, just because of who he's talking to, and also it's just the scale and the scope of his age is lost. Him calling the wizard young is lost on the audience because it has not been established how old the wizard actually is. Like it's meaningful and a big deal, but that big deal is lost. So very weird order, very weird way of expressing it. And after this scene, we get to Elrond and Galadriel and their company of nameless people fighting the Wights. This show has started doing a lot more random D&D encounters. As we had the spider last episode, and now we have Wights this episode. They find out that all of their messages to Celebrimbor have been destroyed by these guys. I was worried that they would try to make Elrond look useless in this scene, so at least he's the one who comes up with the solution to defeat them. But this was an opportunity to show the ring's power, because the ring can see into the unseen world. I think it would have been a natural extension to say that Galadriel could kill these things because she's kind of halfway into the unseen world a bit. Maybe. I think you could have done that. Whatever. It's a scene. And then we go to Arondir, and they're trying to look for Theo. And then we find out, or at least Isildur finds out, that Astrid is actually one of the wild people and has the mark of Adar. And then she's imprisoned, and they're walking, and they're doing very traditional upset people with romantic tension. It's very, very cookie-cutter dialogue about that. That Theo is trapped with the wild men because they got, imprisoned by, I assume, the cave troll, but to save budget, they don't show the cave troll in this. And then there's this random mud pit scene with a mud monster. Again, a lot of D&D encounters this season. So they get stuck in the mud, they get sucked down, and then Astrid, you think she runs away but doesn't. And which shows her character, yada yada yada, and then they kill Snake. Then we go back to the Harfoots, I don't even remember what this version of the Harfoots are called, but they've tied up them. They're going to turn them into the evil masked people, but then they let it slip that their leader, the Harfoots leader, was Sadik Burrows, and then they show this cave painting story about how apparently Nori's Harfoots are from this civilization, and that they went off to look for basically greener pastures and would come back to deliver them to the better lands. So they ask Nori if she's there to do that, and she's like, no, we never found this paradise. But this whole scene endears her to the leader of them, so she doesn't give them in. Reminds me a lot of Galadriel, being thrown in prison in Numenor, and then some religious thing saves her from being kicked out. It's almost the same plot where some almost religious legend thing saves them from being kicked out. Same sort of thing. It's almost like we have the same writers doing this. And then the elves have buried their fallen guy who died in the Wights. I didn't mention that, but he did. And then we have this scene with Elrond and Galadriel. So I think they're trying to play it like Elrond was wrong to bring them here, but I think it was the right call. These Wights had to be dealt with because they're killing people. So it's good that they dealt with them. And then now they know their messages to Celebrimbor have not reached him. This mission was good and a success. One person passed, but that's what being a leader is about. But I think the way they're playing it feels like they're trying to see Galadriel was right. This is a dangerous one. Oh my God. This whole scene, most of it is just nothing. They just talk about nothing. Protecting that which is most fragile, most dear. And then eventually she gets him to promise that he'd put defeating Sauron above her life. That's the only thing that comes out of the scene. The rest of it is almost meaningless dialogue. They go back and forth about nothing. I know you believe this ring is deceiving me, but I believe it is guiding me, and that following it may be our only path to victory. I'm kind of very frustrated by These are opportunities for meaningful conversations, and so much of it is not meaningful at all. Then we have this trio, Arondir and Isildur and Astrid, and because of her heroics at the mud pit, Arondir gives the key to Isildur and let him decide if he wants to release her, and he does. And then she doesn't trust that they'd actually accept her, so she threatens him with a sword. And just like last time she stabbed him, he's really chill about it. Tries to get her to put it down, and then the sword awakens the Ents, and the Ents are mad about the swords. And then we have Arondir trying to calm them down with wood elf-ness. I appreciated there was an awe and majesty to the way that's portrayed and the way they were portrayed, and I appreciate that. Like Arondir's reactions and also him cutting down a tree coming back. I liked that. That was great. Now, of course, the Entwives, this is not very canonical in the sense that the Entwives did not really live in the deep forests. They did gardens and herbs and and that's part of why they separated. The Ents and the Entwives had different tastes, but whatever. They wanted to show that it had a sense of awe. The scene did, and I appreciate that. I feel the show is almost lacking in those moments, and I think that was good to have. Anyway, the trees help them save Theo. It has been pointed out to me that these people might have been kidnapped by the trees, and that's why they're freeing them, especially since there's no mention of a troll anywhere. That's probably the case. And yet, that raises its own problems. One, that's not very clear in the way it's done. Two, why would the trees be imprisoning people? If they have a problem with people, wouldn't they just kill them and then chase out the rest? What's their plan with these people? Why are they in a cage? They're not going to eat them. So, that's odd. Theo and Arondir, they make up and they hug. Good. I'm glad that him being mad at him only lasted an episode, because I want to see that story progress. Tragically, they're going to be separated now, so this whole relationship, unfortunately, the moment it was getting interesting, it looks like they're not going to see each other, because he's going to stay at the village probably to be a healer, and Arondir is going to go off and kill orcs because he promised the trees that he would. We go to the elves, and the elves see the orcs, and that they're going to have to warn Gil-galad about it, so Gil-galad doesn't make the army go off to fight Sauron in the wrong direction. And then Galadriel gives the ring to Elrond. This is just so that she can get captured by Adar, I guess. She's sacrificing herself, but we know she's not going to die, so it just kind of doesn't work very well. And then she says, go back to the shadow.
Go back to the shadow!
They keep using that line because they know how impactful it was when it was said in its actual context.
Go back to the shadow!
And they just try to keep recapturing it. They need to stop doing that. Let her have her own catchphrase or something. I don't know. Just let her say something different. It takes me out every time. She has this fight scene with fire, and it's whatever. And then she gets captured by Adar, which will be a fun twist because she was terrible to him when she had him imprisoned. So we'll see how he brings that back. I don't know. She's captured, and then Elrond and his company are either going back to Gil-galad or going to Eregion. It looks like they're going back to Gil-galad, which makes this abort. Basically, they aborted their mission. I don't know. Whatever. And then it ends. As a story, the pacing is a lot better. Again, as an adaptation, this is a really frustrating adaptation on so many different levels. So many adaptational choices just feel very wrong. It's hard to generate wrath over it just because you're just like, I'm tired, and there's nothing much more to do. I don't expect a good adaptation when I watch this, right? So it's whatever. At least events are happening, I think. Whatever. See you on the next one, I guess.